What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected legends walks onto a talk show stage expecting a respectful conversation, only to face a host who seems determined to tear him down? In just 34 seconds of one explosive comment, Jennifer Hudson would turn what should have been a celebration of greatness into a train wreck that ended with Denzel Washington doing something nobody ever expected, walking off her show in front of millions of viewers. This wasn't just any interview. This wasn't just another celebrity chat that gets forgotten by tomorrow. This was a moment that exposed the difference between someone who earned their place through decades of excellence and someone who forgot where they came from. And it all fell apart faster than anyone could have imagined. When Denzel Washington walked onto the set of the Jennifer Hudson show, the audience erupted. This was a man who commanded respect everywhere he went. 2 Academy Awards, countless iconic performances, and a reputation for being one of the most professional, dedicated actors in the history of cinema. People stood up. People cheered. This was the kind of guest that any host would be honored to sit across from. Jennifer Hudson walked out after him, smiling and waving, soaking in the energy. The show had been doing well, building a solid audience, and landing Denzel was supposed to be a major moment. A career highlight. The kind of interview that gets replayed and referenced for years. They took their seats, and for the first few minutes, everything seemed fine. Jennifer started with the usual pleasantries, talking about how excited she was to have him there, how much she loved his work, all the things you'd expect. Denzel was gracious, humble, answering her questions with the kind of thoughtfulness he was known for. "So Denzel," Jennifer said, leaning back in her chair with a comfortable confidence. "You've been doing this for what, like 40 years now? That's incredible." "More than that," Denzel replied with a slight smile. "But thank you. It's been a blessing." "A blessing," Jennifer repeated, nodding. "That's one way to put it. I mean, you've definitely had an amazing career. All those awards, all those movies. You've really done it all." There was something in her tone. Something just slightly off. Denzel's smile didn't falter, but if you were watching closely, you could see a tiny shift in his expression. A barely noticeable acknowledgement that he'd picked up on something. "I've been fortunate," he said simply. "I've worked with incredible people, learned from the best, and I've always tried to approach every role with everything I have." Right, Jennifer said, waving her hand dismissively. "The whole dedication thing, the method acting, the preparation. We've all heard the stories about how intense you are on set." The audience laughed a little, but it was uncertain laughter. The kind that happens when people aren't quite sure if something is meant to be funny or not. Denzel's expression remained calm. "I take my work seriously. Yes, I think that's important. When people pay their hard-earned money to see a film, they deserve your best effort." Of course, Jennifer said, but her tone had shifted into something that felt almost patronizing. "But don't you think sometimes all that intensity, all that seriousness, maybe it's a little much? I mean, at the end of the day, we're entertainers, right? We're here to entertain people, not cure cancer." The audience got quieter. You could feel the energy in the room changing. This wasn't playful banter. This was starting to feel like something else entirely. Denzel took a breath, his composure still intact. "I respect your perspective, but I don't see it that way. Yes, we entertain, but we also have the ability to inspire, to make people think, to tell stories that matter. That's not something I take lightly." "Stories that matter," Jennifer echoed, and now there was definitely an edge to her voice. "See, this is what I'm talking about. This is that whole actor thing where you guys act like you're doing something so important, so meaningful, like you're philosophers or something." Denzel's jaw tightened just slightly. "I never said I was a philosopher. I said I take storytelling seriously. There's a difference." "Is there, though?" Jennifer leaned forward, and her whole demeanor had changed. The friendly host persona was gone, replaced by something confrontational. Because from where I'm sitting, it kind of sounds like you think what you do is more important than what other people do, more important than what I do. The audience was dead silent now. This had gone from an interview to something uncomfortable, something that felt personal. "I never said that," Denzel responded, his voice even but firm. "I would never say that. Every artist's journey is their own. Every person's contribution is valuable." "But you're thinking it, though, right?" Jennifer pressed. "You're sitting here thinking, oh, I'm Denzel Washington. I've been doing this forever. I've won all these awards. And who is she to question how I approach my work?" "That's not what I'm thinking at all," Denzel said. And for the first time, you could hear a hint of frustration creeping into his voice. "You asked me about my process, and I answered honestly. I don't understand where this is coming from." "Where it's coming from?" Jennifer's voice was rising now. "It's coming from the fact that you walked in here with this whole aura, like you're doing me a favor by being here, like you're some kind of royalty, and I should just be grateful you showed up." "That's absolutely not true," Denzel said, his voice stronger now. "I came here with nothing but respect for you, for this show, and for your audience. I don't know what's happening right now, but this isn't what I signed up for." "Oh, so now I'm not good enough." "For you?" Jennifer shot back. "Now you're too good for my show? Is that what this is?" The audience was shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some people were looking at each other, trying to figure out what they were witnessing. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was an ambush. "I didn't say that," Denzel replied, his patience clearly wearing thin. "You're putting words in my mouth. I came here to have a conversation, to talk about my work, to connect with people. But you seem more interested in creating some kind of conflict that doesn't exist." "Creating conflict?" Jennifer laughed, but it wasn't a genuine laugh. It was harsh, bitter. "That's rich coming from someone with your reputation. Everyone knows you're difficult to work with. Everyone knows you have this massive ego." That was the line. That was the moment everything changed. Denzel's face hardened. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Jennifer said, doubling down. "You walk around Hollywood like you own the place, like everyone should bow down to you because you've won some awards. Well, guess what? You're on my show now. This is my house, and I'm not going to sit here and let you act like you're better than everyone else." "I have never," Denzel said, his voice low and controlled, but filled with an intensity that made everyone in the room freeze. "Never acted like I'm better than anyone. I have spent my entire career trying to uplift others, trying to open doors for people who look like me, trying to set an example of what hard work and dedication can achieve. For you to sit there and question my character, to make accusations about who I am as a person, when you don't know me, when you clearly came into this with some kind of agenda, that's not journalism. That's not hosting. That's just mean-spirited." The audience was completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Jennifer seemed taken aback for a moment, but then her expression hardened again. "Oh, so now I'm mean-spirited? Because I'm not kissing your feet like everyone else does? Because I'm actually asking you real questions instead of just letting you give your rehearsed answers? Real questions?" Denzel's voice was incredulous now. "You haven't asked me a single real question. You've spent the last 5 minutes attacking me for no reason. You've questioned my integrity, my work ethic, my character. And for what? For ratings? To make yourself feel important?" "Don't you dare," Jennifer said, standing up now, her voice loud and sharp. "Don't you dare come on my show and disrespect me like that. You think because you're Denzel Washington, you can say whatever you want?" Denzel stood up too, and his presence was commanding, powerful, but controlled. "I haven't disrespected you, but I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected either. I came here as a guest, with nothing but good intentions, but clearly, that's not what you wanted." "Then leave," Jennifer said, her arms Crossed. If you don't like it, leave. The audience gasped. Literally gasped. This was unprecedented. Hosts don't tell guests to leave, especially not guests like Denzel Washington. Denzel looked at her for a long moment, and you could see the disappointment in his eyes. Not anger, not rage, just deep disappointment. "You know what's sad?" he said quietly. "You have a platform. You have a voice. You could use this show to do something meaningful, to have real conversations, to uplift people. But instead, you chose to do this. You chose to create drama where there wasn't any. You chose to attack someone who came here in good faith." "I don't need a lecture from you," Jennifer snapped. "Clearly not," Denzel said, "because you're not interested in listening. You're not interested in learning. You're just interested in tearing people down to make yourself feel bigger." He started to remove his microphone, calmly, deliberately. The audience was watching in shock. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others were filming on their phones. "What are you doing?" Jennifer demanded. "I'm doing what you told me to do," Denzel said simply. "I'm leaving." "You can't just walk off my show," Jennifer said, and now there was a hint of panic in her voice. She was realizing what was happening, what this would look like. "Watch me," Denzel said. He handed his microphone to a stunned stage manager and started walking toward the exit. The audience didn't know what to do. Some people started clapping, hesitantly at first, then louder. They were showing their support for him, their appreciation for him, standing up for himself. Jennifer stood there, frozen, clearly not expecting this. "Denzel, wait," she called out, but her voice lacked conviction now. He stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back to look at her. "You know what separates someone who lasts in this industry from someone who flames out? It's not talent. It's not even luck. It's character. It's how you treat people when the cameras are on and when they're off. It's whether you use your platform to build people up or tear them down. You might want to think about that." And with that, he walked off the stage. Just walked right out. The audience was in complete chaos now. Some people cheering, some people sitting in stunned silence, everyone trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Jennifer stood there, her face going through a range of emotions. Shock, anger, embarrassment. She looked at the cameras, then at the audience, then at her producers in the wings who were clearly freaking out. "Well," she said, trying to regain some composure, trying to play it off, "I guess some people can't handle a real conversation." But the audience wasn't buying it. The energy in the room had completely shifted. They'd seen what happened. They'd heard what was said. And they knew who was in the wrong. One of the producers ran out onto the stage, whispering urgently in Jennifer's ear. She nodded, her face tight, and then looked at the camera. "We're going to take a quick break," she said, her voice strained. "We'll be right back." But everyone knew they wouldn't be right back. Not really. Because you can't come back from something like that. You can't just move on and pretend it didn't happen. Backstage, Denzel was already heading toward his car. His team was with him, looking concerned, asking if he was okay. He nodded, his face calm but serious. "I'm fine," he told them, "but we're done here." He'd been in this industry long enough to know how these things worked. He knew this would be everywhere, within hours. He knew people would have opinions, would take sides, would analyze every word and every gesture. But he also knew he'd done the right thing. He'd stood up for himself with dignity. He'd refused to participate in a spectacle designed to demean him. And he'd done it without losing his cool, without stooping to her level, without compromising who he was. Back in the studio, the producers were in full crisis mode. The audience was still buzzing, people talking amongst themselves, the energy chaotic and uncertain. Jennifer had disappeared backstage, probably getting an earful from her team. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. This was supposed to be a prestige interview, a ratings winner, a moment of triumph for the show. Instead, it had turned into a disaster. The cameras were still rolling, catching every moment of the aftermath. The confused faces in the audience, the empty chairs on the stage, the palpable tension in the air. Some audience members were already pulling out their phones, texting friends, posting on social media. Within minutes, clips would start circulating. Within an hour, it would be trending everywhere. By the end of the day, it would be all anyone in Hollywood was talking about. Because this wasn't just a celebrity spat. This wasn't just a dramatic television moment. This was a clash of values. A collision between someone who had earned their place through decades of consistent excellence and someone who seemed to have forgotten what respect meant. Denzel Washington had walked onto that stage as one of the most respected actors in the world. He walked off with that respect, not only intact, but enhanced. Because he'd shown everyone watching what it looked like to have standards, to have boundaries, to refuse to be diminished by someone else's insecurity. Jennifer Hudson, on the other hand, had let whatever was going on inside her head turn what should have been a career highlight into a career lowlight. She'd let ego or insecurity or whatever it was drive her to attack someone who came in peace. And now she was going to have to live with the consequences. The stage manager finally came out and addressed the confused audience. Ladies and gentlemen, due to unforeseen circumstances, we're going to have to end today's taping early. Thank you all for coming. There were groans, disappointed murmurs, but also a sense of having witnessed something significant. People filed out slowly, still talking, still processing, still trying to understand what they'd just seen. In his car, Denzel sat quietly, looking out the window as Los Angeles rolled by. His phone was already blowing up. Calls from friends, from colleagues, from his team. He ignored them all for now. He just needed a moment to decompress, to let go of the frustration and disappointment. He thought about all the interviews he'd done over the years. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. And in all that time, he'd never walked off a set. He'd dealt with tough questions, with provocative hosts, with challenging situations. But he'd never been outright attacked like that. Never been so blatantly disrespected. And the thing that bothered him most wasn't even what she'd said about him. He had thick skin. He'd been in this business long enough to handle criticism. What bothered him was the lack of professionalism, the lack of basic courtesy, the fact that she'd used her platform not to have a meaningful conversation, but to try to tear someone down. Back at the studio, Jennifer was in her dressing room, her team hovering anxiously. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by the dawning realization of what had just happened. This wasn't going to just blow over. This wasn't going to be forgotten by tomorrow. "We need to do damage control," one of her producers was saying. "We need to get ahead of this." But how do you get ahead of something like that? How do you spin walking one of Hollywood's most beloved figures off your show? How do you explain attacking a guest for no apparent reason? Jennifer sat there, staring at herself in the mirror, probably replaying the conversation in her head. Maybe wondering where it went wrong. Maybe wondering why she'd let whatever she was feeling override her common sense. The thing about moments like this is they reveal character. They strip away the polish and the pretense and show who people really are when they're under pressure. And what this moment had revealed wasn't flattering. Denzel had revealed himself to be exactly who everyone thought he was. Dignified. Principled. Someone who wouldn't compromise his values, even when it would have been easier to just sit there and take it. Someone who understood that respect is a two-way street. Jennifer had revealed something else entirely. She'd revealed that success can sometimes breed arrogance, that platforms can be misused, that forgetting where you came from and how hard others worked to pave the way can lead to moments of profound miscalculation. The interview that was supposed to last an hour had lasted less than 15 minutes. 15 minutes that would be dissected and analyzed endlessly. 15 minutes that would become a case study in how not to conduct an interview. 15 minutes that would follow both of them for the rest of their careers for very different reasons. For Denzel, it would be another example of his integrity. Another story people would tell about how he carried himself with class, even in difficult situations. Another reason why he was respected, not just for his talent, but for who he was as a person. For Jennifer, it would be a cautionary tale, a reminder that no matter how successful you become, you still have to treat people with respect. That ego and insecurity can destroy in minutes what took years to build. That burning bridges with legends never ends well. The audience members who'd been there would tell the story for years. They'd talk about the tension in the room, the shock on everyone's faces, the moment when Denzel stood up and you knew something unprecedented was about to happen. They'd talk about how the energy shifted, how you could feel the collective realization that they were witnessing something historic. And they'd talk about the contrast between someone who'd built a career on excellence and humility, and someone who'd let success go to their head. The contrast between someone who understood the weight of their platform and someone who'd used theirs carelessly. The contrast between grace under pressure and ego under fire. As the sun set over Los Angeles that day, the story was already spreading like wildfire. Social media was exploding. Entertainment news shows were scrambling to cover it. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a take. But the facts were simple. Denzel Washington had walked onto a talk show expecting a respectful conversation. Instead, he'd been ambushed by a host who seemed determined to prove something, though what exactly remained unclear. And rather than sit there and be disrespected, rather than play along with whatever game was being played, he'd done something radical. He'd simply left. No shouting match. No insults. No dramatics. Just a calm, measured decision that enough was enough. A decision that showed more strength than any comeback or clever retort ever could. In a world where people are constantly told to grin and bear it, to not make waves, to just go along to get along, Denzel Washington had shown that there's another way. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in your own diminishment. That sometimes walking away is not an act of weakness, but an act of strength. That dignity is not about never facing disrespect, but about how you respond when you do. And that, ultimately, was the real story. Not that a talk show interview went wrong, not that two celebrities clashed, but that a man who'd spent decades earning respect refused to surrender it for anyone or anything. The empty chairs on that stage said everything that needed to be said. One chair had held someone who understood what it meant to be a professional, to be gracious, to be respectful. The other had held someone who'd forgotten those lessons, or perhaps never learned them in the first place. And when the moment came, when the choice had to be made between maintaining dignity or staying for the sake of appearances, Denzel Washington made the only choice someone of his caliber could make. He chose himself. He chose his values. He chose to walk away from toxicity with his head held high. That's what happens when you mistake someone's kindness for weakness. When you mistake someone's willingness to be gracious for an invitation to be disrespectful. When you forget that respect is earned, but can be lost in an instant. Jennifer Hudson had built a successful show, had built a platform, had built an audience. But in 34 seconds of letting ego override judgment, she'd shown that none of that matters if you don't have the character to back it up. Denzel Washington had walked into that studio as a legend. He walked out as something more. As a reminder that true greatness isn't just about achievement. It's about how you carry yourself when things don't go as planned. It's about having the courage to stand up for yourself, even when it would be easier not to. It's about understanding that some things, like dignity and self-respect, are too valuable to compromise for anyone. The lights in the studio eventually dimmed. The audience had gone home. The crew had packed up. But the impact of what happened there would linger. In conversations around dinner tables, in think pieces and articles, in the collective memory of everyone who'd witnessed or heard about it. Because sometimes a moment transcends the circumstances that created it. Sometimes a moment becomes about something bigger than the individuals involved. Sometimes a moment becomes a mirror that reflects back truths about respect, about character, about what we value and what we're willing to tolerate. This was one of those moments. A moment when someone refused to be diminished. A moment when walking away spoke louder than any words could. A moment that reminded everyone watching that you teach people how to treat you. And sometimes that teaching requires action, not just words. Denzel Washington got in his car and drove away from that studio, knowing he'd done the right thing. Knowing he'd stayed true to himself. Knowing that his reputation, built over decades of consistent excellence and integrity, was intact. And somewhere in that studio, surrounded by her team, dealing with the fallout, Jennifer Hudson was learning a lesson that many people learn too late. That disrespecting someone of substance doesn't diminish them. It diminishes you. That tearing others down doesn't build you up. It reveals your insecurities. That forgetting to treat people with basic human decency, regardless of who they are or what they've accomplished, is a mistake that can define you in ways you never intended. The talk show world would go on. There would be other interviews, other guests, other moments. But this one would stand alone. Not because of what was supposed to happen, but because of what did happen. Because of what was revealed. Because of the choice that was made. And years from now, when people talk about Denzel Washington, this will be another story in the collection. Another example of a man who understood his worth and refused to let anyone diminish it. Another reminder of what real dignity looks like. Another reason why respect, once earned, should never be taken for granted. The stage was empty. The cameras were off. But the message was clear. You can have all the success in the world, all the platform, all the power. But if you don't have character, if you don't have respect for others, if you let ego drive your actions, none of it matters. None of it lasts. What lasts is how you make people feel. What lasts is the integrity you show when tested. What lasts is the choice you make when faced with disrespect. Do you tolerate it? Do you absorb it? Or do you calmly, with dignity intact, choose yourself? Denzel Washington chose himself. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching what true strength looks like. Not in fighting back with equal hostility. Not in stooping to the same level. But in simply recognizing that you deserve better and having the courage to walk toward it.